Hey everyone, Vincenzo Calla here, and welcome to episode 33 of Let's Discuss Politics. Today, I'm glad to be joined by the Member of Parliament for Calgary Midnapore, Stephanie Kusie. Thanks, Stephanie, for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me, Vincenzo. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, it's so great to have you, and let's get this interview started. So our first segment is called Stephanie's Story, where we'll talk a bit about who you are and your political history. So first off, can you tell me a bit about yourself, your story, and how you got your start in politics?
Sure, that's an interesting question. I think I have sort of two fundamental stories that define my decision to enter politics. The first was when I was in. It was formerly called Brownies. I believe the name was just changed to Embers, and I was working on my citizenship badge. And part of the citizenship badge was to talk to an adult in your neighborhood about politics. So I approached my father and I said, Dad, tell me about politics. And my father said, Stephanie, he said, there are liberals, there are New Democrats, and there are conservatives. Everyone here in South Calgary is a conservative. So this sort of got me thinking and off to the races. I will add the caveat that I do come from a small business family as well. So I think that really defined my family and our policy positions. And then the other story has to do with when I was in the Canadian Foreign Service. And I was the charge in El Salvador. And I was going to see the Minister of Trade in El Salvador to negotiate the next step of what was then the C5 trade agreement, which sort of got minimalized to another format after. But I had received the secure documents. I had completely prepared, and I went to the Minister of Trade in El Salvador, and I had my positions already. I said, okay, all right, we can move on pork, but we can't move on sugar. Got it. So I show up and with the documents in hand, and the minister grabbed the documents out of my hand and said to me in Spanish, you tell your government, we will get back to them in 2 weeks. And it was incredibly clear for me in that moment that I was not the decision maker. I was not the one who was actually having the negotiation, that I was just the messenger. And that was a key moment where I decided at some point I wanted to hold the pen and write the message and not just be the messenger. So those would probably be the two most fundamental stories about my interest in politics.
So on that now, so you had served Canada as a diplomat for a number of years and you worked for Peter Kent for a while as well. So when did you make that decision to run in the by-election in 2017 in your riding to run to become the MP? When did you make that decision and why?
It had always been in the back of my mind after that situation in El Salvador and moving forward in my foreign service career. We made a decision during my time as consul, Canadian consul to Dallas, Texas, within my family, that a foreign service life was not conducive to our family structure and everyone's happiness within our family. And of course, your family, you can get another job, but you really don't, you can't get another family. So we made the decision to go back to Canada. And it was one night when my husband and I were watching I think it was the 11 o'clock news in July of 2016, when former Premier Jason Kenney, for whom I have so much respect for, and the predecessor to my riding, announced that he was stepping down from his federal seat to pursue the reestablishment of a single conservative provincial party in Alberta. And my husband turned to me and he said, you have to do it. And I said, I know. And we were off to the races and we never looked back. I was very lucky. I had a very early start. I went to who I thought would be my number one competitor to ask for their support. And they said, I'm going to go on vacation for a month and think about it. And I thought, oh, that's excellent. You do that. And so I began my campaign immediately. I just felt very strongly that this was what I wanted to do, that this was the next step in my life I wanted to take. And I was very fortunate and pleased with with the outcome. And it's hard to believe, but that was 6 years ago this spring.
So our next segment is now called Serving as an Elected Official, where we're going to talk about your experiences and achievements as an elected official. So 6 years later now, what's your favorite part about serving your community locally first?
My favorite part about serving my community locally is the wins that we can get for Canadians who are truly in distress, be it through situations with the Canada Revenue Agency, be it through the facilitation of passports to get people to important life events like marriages or sadly sometimes funerals, and then facilitation of immigration processes to reunite families as soon as possible. That's truly the most rewarding thing for me. And I've seen people smiling with joy in my office, and I've seen people crying in desperation. But that is truly for me the most satisfying part of my work on a local level.
So now, going on to your parliamentary work, what has been your favorite achievement as an elected official over the past while? I know that you've served in many shadow minister positions and you've done a lot of work there. So what has been your favorite achievement so far?
My favorite achievement, without question, is serving as a voice for the airline sector during the pandemic. This was a sector that was completely ignored by the Trudeau government. And I think we've seen the ramifications of that for months to come. When the pandemic finally began to subside and we saw Canadians beginning to travel again, I really believe a lot of the situations that we saw at airports from a processing perspective, from a luggage perspective, were truly a result of this government not supporting the airline sector through the pandemic. And as such, they had to rebuild from not quite zero, but from the ground floor for sure. It was completely left to them. And I have to say, I know we've seen some hiccups, as is evidenced by the Transport Committee meetings last week, but I really think in so many ways they have stepped up and they have done a good job of delivering services for Canadians after what they went through. But on several occasions, be it at receptions, I had one flight attendant send me a beautiful bracelet she had made with an airplane charm on it that meant so much to me. I had another former ground worker send me a mug with the Calgary Airport flight runway, structure on it with hashtag YYC on the back. I mean, they just made it so clear to me how appreciated our efforts in the Conservative Party were. And probably the most devastating thing I've ever done is accepting the insignia of so many airline workers and walking it over to the Minister of Transport's door saying, you're ignoring these people, you are ruining their lives, you did this to them. So that is probably the most satisfying and significant thing I've done in my time in Parliament.
The last segment is called The World of Politics Around Us, where we'll talk a bit about the world of politics around us. So first off, who is or who was another politician that inspires you?
Well, it's hard for me because I think that politics for women is still very young in the Western world. Rona Ambrose is someone I've always looked up to, and I was just tickled pink when she walked me into the House on my first day on May 3rd, 2017. And I think that she just exemplifies class and grace. And I really make an effort when I'm thinking about my presence or my communications to consider who she is, what she would do, and what she would say. And I think I'd probably have to go like significantly further back in history, and perhaps not to political figures necessarily, but I look to Joan of Arc. I look to Eva Peron, which I know many would judge, but certainly was one of the first prevalent female leaders in the Western world. Ayn Rand, but I think that has to be tempered with compassion. And I'm even interested in Frida Kahlo, of course, not the communist part, but more the strength of conviction and individualistic aspects. But I think, again, individualism must always be tempered by the needs of those around us.
So finally now, I wanted to ask you, what do you think is an issue that needs to be focused on more?
Oh, that's a tough one. I think the one that I've been focusing on this week, as we've seen the return of the public service to the workplace for a mandatory minimum amount of time throughout the week. I think that it is sort of it's also relevant to the McKinsey issue that we're seeing at government operations. And I think that's really redefining our public service. I think we have a public service right now that feels uninvolved, unmotivated. I think our recruitment methods are subpar, our training methods are subpar, and therefore our retention methods are subpar. So certainly, while we live in a world of increasing inflation, increasing cost of living, I think that the public service is closely tied to this, because currently we have a bloated public service which is not delivering services for Canadians, and then alongside a shadow government of consulting firms, which really, in my opinion, probably makes the price of a motivated, effective public service threefold times what the price that it should be, just based upon a lack of direction from this government, and a government not willing to do the hard work of determining clear objectives and missions, rather than just applying Band-Aid after Band-Aid in an effort to survive in the polls.
So that is all for today. Thank you, Stephanie, so much for joining me.
You're welcome, Vincenzo. Thank you very much for having me.
Well, it was so great having you, and make sure to go check out my other conversation with Stephanie on Instagram for top 10. If you're watching this on the date of the premiere, it'll be coming out on Friday. So to stay updated, make sure to follow me on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok at VC Productions 25. Check out my website, vincenzocalla.com. Make sure to like, subscribe, and choose to get notifications here on YouTube. Let's Discuss Politics is a VCalla production. So until the next video, I'm Vincenzo Calla, signing out.